everybody, welcome back. Jiu-Jitsu 2000 here today. I want to talk about a topic today, and the topic that I want to discuss is shotgun shells. Okay, and more importantly, how can we reload them? And let's take that a step further. How can we reload these without the need for a reloading press? In other words, how can we reload this shotgun shell in a survival situation? Okay, and you might be wondering to yourself, what is my definition of survival situation? Let me define that for you. To me, survival situation is things have gotten hard, food has gotten scarce, and we need to reload one of these shotgun shells so that we can go out and do some small game hunting. Maybe some rabbits or some birds. Something so that we can put some food on the table, some meat on the table. Okay, that's my definition of survival situation. So what I want to recommend to you in this video, I'm going to be sharing some very good techniques with you, but the techniques that I'm sharing is not something that you want to do on a normal basis. Okay, I want to hope that you hear that loud and clear. This is not something you want to do on the norm. This is for a survival situation, okay? If you want to reload shotgun shells on a normal basis, please get the appropriate equipment to do that, okay? Again, I can't stress it enough. This is for survival situation. So, yeah, let's go. One thing that I want to stress before we get too deep into this is safety. Like I always do in all of my videos, safety is paramount. Safety is the #1 concern. So let me get my safety glasses. And again, like I always say, make sure they're clear of obstructions. And put them on and wear them throughout this whole process. Okay, now that we've addressed safety, let me go through some of the items that you might need that are on my desk. Obviously, you're going to need a spent shotgun casing. Okay, and you can tell that it's spent by the dent in the primer, and it's empty. You're going to need some household kitchen matches. You're going to need some load data, and more specifically the load data for the amount of, or should I say for the powder that you're going to be using. And in our case we're going to be using Alliant red dot powder or an equivalent, so you need some load data. You're going to need some shot, and this here is a mixture of number 8 and number 7.5 shot. It's a little bit of both mixed together. You're going to need some powder, and the amount of powder will be found out in the load data. Obviously, we're going to need some shotgun primers. These are Remington number 209P Premier primers, and I have one down there in the bottom I'm going to pull out just so I can set it aside. That's what a shotgun primer looks like. Some sort of wax. I like to use candles. They work pretty good. Birthday candles. You can use crayons. You can use beeswax, but you need some sort of wax. If you don't have wax, I'll talk a little later about some of the alternatives, other things that you can use. You will need a wad, and these are brand new wads. Okay, so depending on what you want, you know, you need a wad. But in our case, we're going to use an old wad that we picked up out at our local shooting area. Okay. you will need a piece of wood or a dowel, and the important thing is that it'll fit inside of the shotgun shell. And it doesn't have to fit real tight or anything. You just need a stick or something. You know, you can chop a branch off, and as long as you have a stick or something that'll fit in that shotgun shell. And it needs to be fairly strong. A wrench, and if you don't have a wrench, you can use something like, let me see, I'm looking at my toolbox over here. You can use a socket, something like that. Okay, and I'll explain this in a minute. Doesn't matter what size the socket is. Some sort of piece of metal. Doesn't have to be, this happens to be aluminum, it could be steel or brass or whatever you got. Or you could even use a rock or something, as long as you have a flat, hard surface. This is cardboard. I'll explain that in a minute. A framing nail, pair of scissors, utility knife, so we can cut some things, and last but not least, a hammer. What I've done here is I've taken a piece of paper and I've wrote down the load data out of the book. 12 gauge shell. We're going to use 7.5 shot or number 8. We're mixed, but it doesn't matter. We're using 1 ounce of shot. We're going to be using red dot powder, and the book says that we can go between 16 and 18.5 grains of red dot. We're going to use 17.5 grains of a powder. Okay, now the powder is an equivalent to red dot. It's very, very similar to red dot. So we're going to use 17.5 grains. Remington number 209P Premier primers. And so all the load data I've got written down. Okay, so now we're ready to start the process. So first thing I want to do is I want to look inside the case. Let's see if I can find a flashlight to show you. Hopefully you can see in there. I'm trying to turn the angle good for you. See the primer inside there? You can see there's a little hole in the primer. Well, what you need to do is you need to take your nail and drop it down into the shotgun shell, into that hole in the center of the primer. Okay? Now, we need to set this shell on something, but we don't want a flat surface. We want something that primer can fall into. So that's where either the socket, you know, because of the hole will match up and we can set it on the socket and knock it through, and the primer will fall through. You know, it doesn't matter which side you use. So we could use a socket, or we could do something like this, you know, set it on something like this. So as long as you have it setting on something where the primer can fall through. So we'll just go ahead and use the socket, and I'm going to take my hammer and just gently tap the nail. See, the nail came through the bottom of the case. We've decapped it, and underneath that socket is our spent primer. Okay, so that's decapping the shotgun shell. Okay, from here we want to take a new primer. Whoa, getting a little close. We want to take a new primer and start to insert it into the bottom of the case. Now, you're not going to be able to get it to go all the way through with your fingers, but you will get it to start. Make sure you got your safety glasses on for this step. Take whatever piece of metal that you had, or rock, or whatever flat hard surface you have, set the shotgun shell on that flat hard surface, and now we're going to take our dowel or our piece of wood and we're going to put it down inside the shotgun shell, and with our hammer we're going to very gently, lightly tap down onto this dowel, and what that's going to do is it's going to seat our primer for us. So let's take a look. See that? We have a nice seated primer in our shotgun shell. Things are looking good. The next step in our process of reloading the shotgun shell, we don't need our metal anymore, so we can push that away. We don't need our socket, we don't need our wrench anymore. But what we do need is we need our powder. Okay, and like I said earlier, we have a predisposed amount of powder already. Predispensed, I guess you should say. We're going to pour that powder into the shotgun shell. So now we have a charged shotgun shell. See the powder down in there? So now we're charged. The next step is to take our socket again and set the shotgun shell on top of the socket. The reason you want to set it on top of the socket is, like I mentioned earlier, because you don't want the primer to come in contact with anything. A lot of people, including myself, will generally set the shell down on the table and push the wad in. But that's not a good practice because the primer is in contact with the table. So we're going to use this socket, the hole more specifically on the top, to ensure that our primer, that there's nothing pushing the primer. So I'm going to take a wad and I'm going to start to insert it into the top of the shotgun case. Just like so. And I'm going to use my fingers to kind of push it to get it started. Once you get it started, it'll get a little bit stiff, so you'll need your dowel to kind of push it in. See that? We got the wad started. Okay, now, again, like I said, resting the primer over something that it can't come in contact with, we're going to set that down. We're going to take our dowel down into the bottom of the shotgun shell, and with our hammer again, we're going to gently tap that wad down until we compress the wad against the powder. So you want a good compressed powder charge. Now what you're going to feel, and I'll show you a wad to explain. You see this, these wads have give in them. When you're sitting here pushing that thing down, you'll feel the wad compressing. So when I'm sitting over my socket here to keep the primer safe, and I'm hitting this down, you'll feel the wad compressing, and that's okay. At this point, it's important to take this shell and chamber it into the shotgun that you're going to be using. And make sure that the thing is chambering well, because some shotgun shells, if you have a normal shotgun reloader, you'll notice that you actually resize this metal portion of the case. And since we're skipping that step, because it's a survival situation, that's why I'm recommending that we go ahead and insert this into our gun. I'm not going to show it on camera here, but you want to stick it in that shotgun and make sure that it chambers. Now, with that being said, the shotgun shells that I reload by hand like this, I generally don't shoot them out of a semi-automatic. I shoot them through a pump, or better yet, a single shot or a double barrel. Okay, because they don't hold together very well. I mean, they do a good job, but you know what I'm getting at, I guess. So I don't really need these wads. I just had those out for display. Let me move them out of the way. Okay, so we have our powder in there. We've got our wad in there. What I need to do now, and I'm going to back the camera back out so you can see, is I'm going to take this shotgun shell at the bottom of the crimped area, and I'm just going to use a utility knife, and I'm going to cut that crimp section out. Try to make your cut as straight as you can. So we have something like this. Okay, and it's very crooked, but we'll fix that later. In this section, I'll talk about this section in a minute. Now it's time to insert some shot. And what I want to do is I want to take my shotgun shell and I want to pour shot in there until the shot fills to the top of the wad. So I'm just sitting here putting a little bit of shot in there. And this will be approximately 1 ounce of shot. So that's what it looks like. Nothing too crazy. Now what I want to do is I want to take this piece of cardboard and I want to cut a circle, hopefully the same size as the diameter of the shotgun shell. I'm just basically going to use this to go on top of the shot. So let's take a look. Have my circle that I cut out. It's just going to fit right on top of there, just like so. From here, I'm going to take my piece of wood and I'm just going to kind of pack it around to make it seat real nice. Doesn't have to be anything crazy. I'm just using this to separate the shot from what I'm fixing to do. Okay, so I have the cardboard in there. Okay, we're almost done. We have pretty much our shotgun shell. We've got powder, we've got a wad, we've got shot, we have cardboard in there. Now it's time to seal this shut. Now I mentioned earlier crayons, beeswax, candles. These are all good things to use to seal this shotgun shell shut. But if you're in a survival situation and you don't have candles available to you, you can use things like sap off of a tree. And what I would do was I would take a pan with some boiling water and I would drop some tree sap in there and I'd mix it around with the stick. And that tree sap, through the boiling process, it would clean that sap and it would start to stick to this stick here. And as I mix it around and then when I pull the stick out, it'll look kind of like a Q-tip. It'll have like this sap around the tip of it. Then I can take a match and drip, by heating the sap up, I can drip it and use that as my sealant for the shotgun shell. But in our case today, I'm just going to use a simple birthday candle. When it comes to using sap versus candle wax or any kind of wax for that nature, I'd recommend using wax because it's a lubricative type property to it. It has some viscosity to it. So when you shoot that through your gun, it's actually good for your barrel. It doesn't hurt anything. But if you're going to be using tree sap, you could have some problems because it's a very sticky type material. One more thing that you can use if you don't have sap or wax is you can use this plastic piece that you cut off the top of the wad. Basically, you'll light it on fire and you'll melt it down in there, okay? And you want to be careful not to put too much of this in there because you don't want to raise the pressures that are being developed in this shotgun shell too high. Otherwise, they could be dangerously high almost. So if you use plastic, just put enough to hold this thing together. Don't make it like solid. You want it to be able to break free and let your shot out. But like I said, we're going to use candle wax today. So I'm going to take my kitchen match. Look at that, it went out. That's funny. I'm basically going to just light my candle and I'm going to let wax kind of drip all over this thing. I've got the flame, you know, I'm encouraging it to drip wax. And what we're doing is we're sealing the top of the case here. Take your scissors if you need. Cut that thing down a little bit if it starts getting a little crazy. And just keep letting the candle wax go in there. You can also use the candle to help burn some beeswax or sap or whatever you're going to use. Crayons, whatever. But candle wax works very good. Beeswax is excellent also. Plastic, you know, it works like I said. But we're just sealing up the top of the case. And you want the candle wax to be higher than the cardboard was. So just keep adding it to it until you get it high enough where it looks good to your liking. Try not to let the flame come in contact with the side of the shotgun shell because you don't want to burn or melt the plastic of the shell. That'll distort it and it might not chamber well in your shotgun. So that looks good. Now we'll just let that sit for a few minutes and we'll come back and let it solidify, let it dry, let it cool down. Okay, it sat here for probably 5 or 10 minutes and it had a little chance to dry. And I'm going to zoom the camera back out and talk about what we need to do now. So there we have our shell, and we had a little bit of leakage on the outside, so you can just scrape that off with your finger. You could use a stick, a rock, whatever you want. You don't have to scrape it all off, just get most of it off. It's not going to hurt if you're using something like wax if you miss some of it, because wax, like I said, it has viscosity to it, and it's not going to hurt too much because it's got some lubricative features to it. But anyway, you want to get some of that off. Now, from here, you see the top of it's kind of out of round. The good thing about setting this down on a surface is liquid always goes level. So now we're going to take our utility knife and we're just going to cut around the top. Cut the excess off so that we have a nice flat level top on it. Okay, and it doesn't have to be anything crazy. Just do the best you can, get it as straight as you can. Doesn't have to be anything significant. So something like that looks nice and clean, nice and straight. Everything looks good. So again, that's what your finished shotgun shell looks like. If you had some, like if you happen to rough up the top of this wax, you can melt a little more on top of there or just kind of rub it down. But that's it for loading a shotgun shell. So I have two of them that I made. One of them I used beeswax and the other one I used candle wax, and they both turn out just fine. But that's how you reload a shotgun shell in a survival situation. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take one of these guys out to the range and we're going to shoot it and show you what that looks like. So again, thanks for watching. We'll see you at the range. Okay everybody, I'm back. I have the shot shell that I just made, and I'm going to be using a single shot 12 gauge shotgun, and downrange a little bit. I don't know if you can see it too well, but there's a piece of, towards the bottom of your screen there. I didn't bring my tripod, so I'm trying to prop this up on the hood of the truck. But there's a piece of drywall, and that's what I'm going to be shooting with this shot. There's the shot. Let's go take a look. This had no holes, no problems with it when I first set it up. So all of this shot and everything that you see here is from our shot shell that we just made. And I shot it from about 25 yards away. So again, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.